Hi, Rob B here with Rob D, and you are listening to the Property Podcast. It's episode 218, and this week, we think complaining is for losers.
Yes, it is. It's not only for losers, it's also seriously damaging to your health, your wealth, and the people around you. And you're not a loser, you're a winner because you're listening to the Property Podcast. So in this episode, we are going to make sure that you realise how dangerous complaining is, and we're going to give you some practical tips to make sure you don't slip into bad habits.
That's right, and in this week's news story, well, simply, you've got absolutely no reason to complain because this is one of those rare win-win scenarios.
Yeah, this is the Homeless Reduction Bill, which has passed Parliament, is going to become law at the next Queen's speech. And basically what it's saying is that councils aren't going to be able to drag out awarding possession under Section 21 in the same way as they have done in the past. So basically what happens is if you go through a Section 21 procedure, you get all the way through, the judge says, yep, you are allowed to have the property back, and then the council can advise the tenant to stay put until the bailiffs turn up to really drag things out as long as they can and tell the tenant that if they don't do that, then they will be making themselves voluntarily homeless and therefore they won't be rehoused. Now, this is obviously bad for you as a landlord. It's terrible for the tenant as well because they're having to stay in there sort of right to the bitter end and then be rehomed in a rush with lots of uncertainty. So the guidance for a while has been that councils shouldn't do this. Now, by law, they're not going to be allowed to do that. They're going to need to help tenants earlier. So indeed, Rob, a rare piece of good news. Let's enjoy it and let's not complain about anything.
No, let's not, including that we've had to record this twice because the recording didn't work first time round. But we will not do that, and to be fair to Rob, he stepped up to record this episode. So obviously, Rob, you're living by the examples that we're going to run through. So what is this week all about?
Well, there is an important lesson in here. It seems like it's just an excuse for a rant, but it's really not. It will not have escaped your attention, I'm sure, if you've ever spent any time around human beings, that some people moan all the time. And moaning is a really bad idea. It makes life worse for them and for everyone around them. So are you a complainer? Is it possible that you are one of these moaners that we're complaining about without realising it? Well, we are going to give you some examples of nonsense problems in property especially and in business and life as well. See if you moan about any of those things. If you do find yourself going, oh, actually, I do get bothered by things like that, well, don't worry, because we're going to give you some things to do about it as well. So, Rob, what are some things that you hear people complaining about that they really shouldn't be?
Okay, so some examples. The first one, my rent's a day late. Oh, boo-hoo, your rent's a day late. You know what? Sometimes that will happen. And if it's only very occasionally, who cares? Don't let your world end because your rent's a day or two late. As long as it's been paid, then that's the main thing. And yes, you don't want to get into a habit of allowing that to happen. But the point is, there are much, much worse things that can go on in your property portfolio and your general life. Don't let the small things bother you. This one, prime example of one that you should not. Another one, the conveyancing process, so that's you buying the property, is dragging. You're not buying a washing machine. You're buying a property, and there are solicitors involved, and there are people involved, and there are often mortgages involved. And with all these spinning plates happening, yes, from time to time, this process will take a long time. It happens. But the harder things in life, sometimes you have to work for. And the benefit that you're going to buy an asset that's going to pay you every month, that can look after your financial future, and possibly future generations' financial futures, is possibly worth working through. Don't let the small details that you can possibly find a reason to moan about take you away from the big, exciting things that you're trying to do.
Okay, having a bit of a rant. This is fun. I want to get in on this. I've got a couple as well. So also, getting a mortgage is hard work. That's another complaint that you hear all the time. Well, yeah, getting a mortgage can be hard work. You do have to fill in lots of forms, spend some time answering annoying questions, having delays. But think about it. You're being lent 3/4 of the money that you need to buy a property. That's amazing. And at the moment, you're being lent it at silly interest rates. So yes, lenders can be annoying, but hey, it's their money. And if they're going to lend it to you, they're allowed to ask whatever questions they like. Another thing that you hear people complaining about all the time is that the property needs some refreshing doing it. So maybe some tenants have moved out and it needs a coat of paint or a carpet replacing or something like that. Well, yeah, but you know what? These things happen. It's an asset, it's making you money, you should have budgeted for it. And you know, if that's all you've got to worry about when tenants move out, then you're not doing too badly. So those are just some of the problems that you hear people complaining about in property. If we broadened it out to talk about business and life in general, you'd be able to come up with an endless list of things that people will moan about, most of them pretty trivial. It's annoying, but more than being annoying, it actually matters. And Rob, people who complain are really damaging themselves.
They are, because while you're busy complaining, or the people you know are busy complaining, they're missing the opportunities. There's so much happening out there, so much good you can focus on, so much potential to go after. But if you're busying yourself with moaning about the small niggly things that are going wrong, or that could go wrong, or haven't gone as well as you'd liked, well then, you're not going to be able to do the fun things. And that's going to stop you from taking action in the first place. So don't let that happen. Focus on the good stuff. Focus on what you can control. Try and take the best out of every situation, and you'll do a lot better. And Rob, as we've touched on, you're going to be less happy if you're moaning.
Yeah, and here's the really killer part for me. If you're complaining about things and focusing on the negatives, you will be less happy, but reality will be no different at all. Whether you take something in your stride and deal with it, or whether you spend ages bellyaching about it to anyone who'll listen, or even just to yourself, running over and over it in your own head, nothing is going to be different. So your own mood will be different. You're voluntarily putting yourself in a bad place, and reality is no different at all. So you're giving yourself a negative experience when you don't need to. And not only that, but nobody's going to want to be around you if you start complaining out loud either. So you're giving yourself a worse time. You're going to find people sidling away from you, not wanting to be around you when you're complaining about stuff. So this really does matter. It affects the opportunities that you spot and can take advantage of, and it affects your day-to-day experience of the world. So that's a valuable first step. If you do spot yourself complaining sometimes, and I think we all do it sometimes, of course we do, but if you find that you're doing it habitually or more than you'd want to, then let's give you some practical tips to cut it down a bit.
Okay, so first of all, just accept that you're not entitled to everything being brilliant all the time. You're not. It's how you deal with adversity is that what really defines the winners from the losers. So look at all the winners that you can recognise in your immediate life and more famous winners. The easy ones to refer to, you think of Elon Musk, you think of Richard Branson. Do they come across as moany people who focus on what can't be done? Or are they risk takers? Are they opportunity seekers? Are they the people who are bubbly and have got things going for them? Of course they are. If they sat around thinking about what's going to go wrong, how it's going wrong, how every single challenge is going to hold them back, they would not have achieved what they have achieved. The people who do things in life are those that see the opportunity, don't waste their time moaning about what's happened. In property, 99.9% of the time, it's not necessarily bad situations, they're just lessons. They're lessons you can learn. By the 0.1% of things in property that are absolutely disastrous, you can't bounce back from, hopefully you'll never experience that, because the rest of the time, it's stuff you can control or at least learn from. So make sure you do that. And then once you've looked at a situation, try and find the silver lining from it. Try and find, okay, this has happened, but what's the good that come from it? And that might be that you are going to learn and you're going to take advantage of a situation next time. It may be that you haven't actually seen the opportunity that's arisen from what's happened. So whatever it plays out, particularly in property, most of it is insignificant when you really think about it. And much of it, there's actually opportunity involved.
Yeah, and actively practicing looking for the silver lining like that does actually get easier. If you practice it, you start to kind of default to, rather than getting bothered by it, you immediately move past it and find the positive angle. And I've actually got better than this. I think in part is due to you, Rob. Like, you are really, really good at finding a positive spin on things. And the more that you do that, the better you'll get at doing it. And before long, your brain will default to finding that rather than your brain defaulting to finding the downside. So it does get easier.
I've got a nice proverb for you, Rob, that was on the Property Hub Instagram account recently. So there you go. If you didn't know we have that, you do now. And this says, when the caterpillar thought the world was ending, he turned into a butterfly.
Ah, there you go.
Do you like that, Rob?
I do like that. I do like that. Well, I've got a proverb, well, not a proverb. I've got a little rule of thumb, a heuristic, if you like, of my own, which isn't quite as poetic as that. But it is something that I've found useful. It's a little perspective test that I use when encountering challenges, let's say. And that is, will this matter in a year's time? That's something that I've started asking myself reflexively whenever I encounter anything. And almost all the time, the answer is no. And if it won't matter in a year's time, then why worry overly about it now? Occasionally you'll encounter something that will matter, and in that case, fair enough. Don't complain about it, but give it the focus it deserves. But most of the time you go, well, okay, this is bothering me today. I could really stew about this for the next hour, but next year, hey, next week, I won't even remember this. So don't get too bothered about it. And as a final practical tip, if you're ready to get a little bit philosophical with me, Stoicism is a philosophy. It's an ancient Greek philosophy. There's a lot to it, but basically it boils down to distinguishing between what's in your power to change and what isn't, and doing absolutely everything you can when it comes to the things that you can control, and not being at all bothered by the things that you can't, and making a very clear distinction. It's very simple, but it's very powerful. And there's actually a book called The Daily Stoic, which is brilliant. For every single day of the year, it gives you a very short passage to read about a tenet of Stoicism and a little explanation of it as well. So in about 2 minutes a day, you can kind of ground yourself and hopefully set yourself up for the day ahead in a positive and non-moany frame of mind.
And based on your recommendation, Rob, I've bought that book, so I look forward to reading it. It's important, okay, you've become aware of it. We've talked about examples of things that really don't matter. We've told you why this is so important in the first place. But Rob, what can people take away from this? What are the real lessons? What do people need to absorb the most?
Okay, well, I think, first of all, complaining is an attitude. Develop the attitude of not complaining, and this will give you a superpower. If you can do that, you'll have a better life without needing to change anything in reality. And that's pretty cool. That's worth focusing on. If you can give yourself a better life without anything else needing to change, that's worth spending a bit of time on. And there's a quote from Zig Ziglar, which I really like. It says, if you have time to whine and complain about something, then you have the time to do something about it. In other words, I think what we're trying to say here is that complaining is a habit like any other, and you can break that habit if you try. Hopefully we've persuaded you as well that it's worth trying, and we've given you some tips to put into action. So if you recognise yourself in some of those complaints, or you realise that it's something that you want to improve on, we've given you some tips. Use them. Start getting to work on that habit. You'll notice that at first it'll take you a while to catch yourself, but before you know it, you'll start reprogramming your brain. Those pathways will start to change, and you'll find yourself taking a much more positive outlook on things, not letting the small stuff get you down, and spotting all those opportunities you were previously missing when you were busy complaining.
We've talked about this before, but when you find yourself in a funk and you've realised it's happening, practice gratitude, because you can't feel neggy, complainy when you're thinking about things you're grateful for. So we've talked about how we focus on maybe 2 to 3 things that we're grateful for at that moment in time. It doesn't have to be anything significant. It can be your family. It can be that the fact you're in this opportunity to be able to invest in the first place, whatever it is. But when you start to deeply feel that, we're getting a little bit hippie-ish here, Rob, but we say it because we believe it. But if you start to get in that mindset, you feel a lot better. And I think it's worth bearing in mind that I get it. I get it. I know why people complain, because it's easy, because people give you sympathy when you complain and you think, oh, I like that. People are giving me attention, and that's what we all want deep down. And the media will reinforce your worldview, because most of it is negative. All the news we watch is all negative. But you have to remember that 99% of the world is brilliant and amazing, and the news focuses on the worst stuff that is happening in the world. It doesn't tell you about the person who picked money up off the floor when they seen someone drop it and chase after them to give them it back. It doesn't tell you about the time you helped that old lady down the stairs. All these wonderful acts that are going on all the time that people are positive and upbeat about. The world is actually a great place. You don't need to be negative. It's easy to be negative, but your life becomes so much richer and fruitful when you shift and start looking for opportunity and get excited about what can happen. So try it out. Important podcast. Hopefully this has hit home. And you know what? If somebody is a little bit negative, kind of discreetly recommend the podcast to them, and hopefully they pick up this episode.
Yep, hopefully so. Well, we'd love to hear your thoughts on this. The show notes are going to be at thepropertyhub.net/stopcomplaining. You can go over there to check out the links, and we'd love to hear your thoughts in the Property Hub. Do you relate to anything in this episode? Have you got any tips of your own to sort of help get yourself out of the complaining mindset? We'd love to hear about it. Coming up, we've got a resource of the week, which is actually a brilliant example of some of the great things that are going on in the world. So that's coming up. But another wonderful thing that happens every single week is someone leaves us an iTunes review, and we're very grateful for that. So, Rob, what have we got this week?
No wonder we're so upbeat. Okay, this week, a huge thank you to Dorsey4. And Dorsey says, I would recommend anyone who's thinking about investment, property, pensions, their future, pretty much everyone, to try this podcast out. The podcast, the books, and the magazine produced by the two Robs are completely responsible for why I now call myself a landlord. With a growing portfolio, I am 100% sure that the Robs will continue to support me in my property journey. Well, we will, Dorsey. We will. Don't worry, we're not going anywhere. You left that review back in September, but we're still here and we're not going anywhere. So well done to you for taking action. Congratulations.
Yes, indeed. Brilliant to hear. Okay, as promised, resource of the week. I absolutely love this. This is an app called donorsee.com, DONORSEE.com, and it's basically the most direct way I've ever seen of giving to a good cause. So everyone likes giving to charity. Charity's brilliant, but often when you're giving money to a charity, you've kind of got this sneaking suspicion that a lot of that money is going on salaries, on administration and overheads. So you don't know how much of your money is actually going to a good cause in the end, and you never really get to see directly the difference that your money has made. DonorSee solves that problem. What it does is connect you to people who go out to other countries, mainly in Africa and South America, but elsewhere as well, doing missionary or charitable work who need funds. So, for example, there'll be someone who's out in Africa. They come across a family who badly need a home to live in because they're homeless, and they need $1,000 to build that home. They will post that project on DonorSee, and you can fund an amount of that project. That money gets sent directly to the person who's running the project with no deductions at all. And the best bit is, once it's funded and they're working on it, they will send you updates through the app so you can actually see the difference that your money is making. So they'll send you photos and videos, and it's absolutely brilliant because it means that you can go on there, you can go, oh yeah, I'd like to give $50 to this project. Then every so often your phone will buzz and there'll be a video and you'll see a house being built, or there'll be a photo of people smiling and saying thank you. And it is just fantastic. It's the best app on my phone by a million miles because rather than it buzzing and sort of telling me about something I need to do or something like that, every time it buzzes, it's good news and it makes me feel a little bit good about myself. And it reminds you, first of all, that there are people far worse off than you are. And secondly, it reminds you that there are good people doing something about it and trying to make the world a better place. So that's a huge recommendation from me, donorsee.com.
Well, since you told me about that, Rob, a couple of weeks ago, I've downloaded it, and it's very addictive in a very good way. Not like a game that you keep going back to and doesn't really give you any major reward. This does. So check it out. A wonderful app for hopefully what you found a wonderful episode. And next week, of course, we'll try and match that. And hopefully you will join us for an episode back into property. And we're going to tell you, no matter what age you are at, how to invest. So we're going to look at different sections of people's lifetimes and how they should be investing based on their current age. So if you're young, we'll give you a plan. If you're in the middle of your life, we'll give you a plan. And if you're later in life, more mature, let's say, then we will give you a plan also. So join us next week for that. It should be a cracker of a podcast. And of course, we'll be back on Tuesday with Ask Rob and Rob. So you've got plenty to keep yourself busy with until now and then. So that just leaves us to say, don't worry, be happy, smile, and we'll be back next Tuesday. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thanks for listening to The Property Podcast. For show notes, all our past episodes, and to leave a review, go to thepropertyhub.net/podcast.